Happy to be here. Happy to be here with everyone. Just to give you some background, I founded Sustainable Ocean Alliance, which is a global nonprofit, because I saw there being a major gap in the activation of young people globally. Oftentimes, you are surrounded in these high-level discussions with experts and scientists and diplomats and heads of state, but the information isn't going outside of those doors. So that's why I built the organization, to give young people a seat at the table and also give them the resources, the funding, the mentorship they need to be successful in bringing their own ideas to life. And through that, we are also supporting the development of ocean technology startups and supporting their growth and advancement. And so, I'd like to take a step back and understand a little bit of how much we have transition in the ocean space. When you look at it, it's 100-year-old industry or more. And in the past, the ocean was only thought about in terms of exploitation or exploration. Those were the main uses of the ocean. And so now we're entering a very exciting time frame and phase, in that we're thinking about the regeneration of our ocean. And so there's so much opportunity for disruption here. And as it relates to illicit trade, we as a new generation value transparency, value the importance of measuring impact, and also holding corporations accountable. So I think there's a lot to be said around these values that the next generation is holding, and how they're being translated into building new ocean tech startups and opportunities. So I'll leave it at that and can go further into it down the line. My generation is much more aware of, first of all, greenwashing is something that it's so much more obvious nowadays, when corporations are just throwing out information for the sake of their marketing and for their profiles, instead of because of what they're actually doing. I also think that we are much more aware of how inundated we are with news day to day, and how everything is filtered, right? Filtered to serve your personality and to serve your needs, as opposed to you getting a diverse amount of information. So I definitely feel as if my generation, one, was really brought into this lifestyle and this mentality of information overload, and then we need to find the source of it all, because then you also have fake news, which of course affect everyone, and it affects our decisions, it affects our way of thinking, it affects how we connect with others. So I definitely think that like Gunter was saying, it's so critical to find those innovative, disruptive technologies, invest in them, celebrate them, and then implement them as far and wide as we can. But it really is going to take this triad of partnerships, right? We absolutely need policies. We need governments to be allies. We need them to serve policies. We need to have the alternatives, right? Such as technology, such as innovations. And then we also need to have consumer demand. And once we have those three sectors aligned, that's when real change happens. And we saw that happen in the plastic space. Once we started getting bans on single-use plastic, especially around straws, then we started seeing more alternatives to plastics, right? And then we started seeing people become more aware of the plastic issue. So that was such an amazing case study of seeing a turtle that had a plastic straw stuck in its nose become the revolution as to why plastic should be removed from our environment and from our society. And it's a great case study to look at, because everything else followed afterwards, right? So yeah, I think that's something definitely interesting to talk about. Absolutely. I'll start answering that question, which will bring me into talking about the biggest challenges that ocean technology startups are facing, which is relevant to this conversation and to the plastic problem. So when you look at the spectrum of ocean technology, especially given that it's such a nascent industry, on one end, you have the ideation phase, right? You have people that have very early stage ideas, very grassroots projects, and then you move into the seed stage. There are some companies that might have already have a product in place, have a business plan in place, and those are the companies that we're currently working with, and they're going through our accelerator program, where we give them access to mentorship, access to funding, access to resources, and access to exposure to what they're working on. And then you go into Series A, companies that already have proven their model, are raising some funding, and then you go into Series B, C, and hopefully the exit. And so when you look at the ocean technology space, we have tremendous financing gaps. we have a lot of funding going into very seed, very early stage companies, but then they can't raise that next set of capital to get them past Series A and past a Series B and getting them into scalability and expansion. And so although we have all these amazing new products, we have alternatives to plastic by seaweed. We have avocado seeds that are being used for that. We have shrimp shells that are being used to replace styrofoam. We have the technology, it exists, but we don't have the capital that is being injected into the space to make that growth happen. So financials is definitely one key factor that is holding us back in making sure that we can scale. The second area of it as well is we don't have enough pilot projects happening. So when you think about some of these technologies, for example, a company that is working on tidal energy, they need to put their technology in some type of coastal area, but governments have such rigid permits and they're so expensive to bypass that oftentimes these companies have to leave their region where they're from and go into a whole different country and an island nation to trial their technology. So how can we make pilot testing a little bit more accessible to these entrepreneurs? And then the third aspect of it is education. We ultimately have to educate the users of these technologies for them to be early adopters. And when you think about the plastic problem, it's become easier because people are more mindful of how they're interacting with plastic, their day to day. They're using more reusables. But when you're talking about technology such as sustainable fishing, it's so hard to educate fishermen on how to change their habits, on how to educate, their parents that they have, been passed down this trade, for the past, millennial. And it's really about that, one-to-one education and conversation you have to have on the ground. So, that's the spectrum of challenges we're facing in the ocean technology entrepreneurship side. And it's so important to tackle the capital side of it, the pilot project side of it, and also the education at the grassroots level. And then to give you two examples of some companies that are working on this traceability question that you asked, Carlos, one of our companies that we just supported through our program is called Traymodo. And what Traymodo is doing is they're building a platform so that people can see which companies are selling and buying seafood ethically, right? And so when you think about it, it's like a LinkedIn or a Yelp for seafood. So anyone can go in there and see who are the buyers of seafood, who are the sellers, and they're certifying them to say, this seafood company is actually tracing, and they can see where the fish is coming from. They can see whether they've been tracked. They can see if they have any partnerships with local governments to make sure that actually happens. And what's so exciting about that is that the consumer can go in there and track the fish that they're buying from the grocery store all the way to a major corporation like a Walmart, or any of these big corporates that buy fish can go in there. And if consumers are seeing that they're buying from illegally sourced fish, we can hold them accountable. So that's one example of the supply chain, right? How can we make sure that we have the transparency to be able to monitor these companies from the comfort of our homes? So that's one example of a company. Another company I'll briefly touch upon is called OceanWorks. And OceanWorks is a global ocean marketplace. So as many of you have seen, there's a lot more demand now for recyclable plastics, right? To make sunglasses, to make surfboards, to make chairs, bicycles, you name it. But oftentimes the people that want to make these new products, because they're being sold left and right, they don't know where to source the plastic from. And the biggest problem that we have is that some of these are labeling them as resource plastic when they're really not. They're virgin plastics. So we need to make sure that we can find the identifiers to see where exactly is each piece of plastic being picked up from, where is it being sourced from, and how is it being utilized at the end of the spectrum. And so this company, OceanWorks, is the liaison between the folks wanting to find these products and the people like literally going out there and picking up the plastic from beaches, from different areas, and preventing it from entering the ocean space. So I think those two examples are pretty amazing to see how these startups have the solutions, they have the passion, they have the energy. We just need to make sure that we can help them get to scale and help them access regions of different markets that they otherwise wouldn't be able to be in.